The big focus on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Ukraine, where the leader of India will be meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Both the leaders were at the Martyrologist exposition at Ukraine National Museum to honor the memory of the children who died in the two-year war that has been raging between Ukraine and Russia. The National Museum of Ukraine is a center dedicated to the victims of the Holodomor of 1932-1933, a man-made famine that killed millions of Ukrainians. The museum was opened on the day of the 75th anniversary of the Holodomor in 2008. It gained the status of a national museum in 2010. On 28th of November 2006, the Parliament of Ukraine voted to recognize the Holodomor, a devastating famine which took place in the early 1930s in the former Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, as a deliberate act of genocide against the Ukrainians. I have with me Ruslan Bortnik. He is the director of Ukrainian Institute of Politics. Ruslan, thank you for joining us on the telecast. First of all, the significance of President Zelensky inviting Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the National Museum today.
Yes, of course. Hello, colleagues. It's very important step from Ukrainian side, because Ukrainian side understands how important are the children's life for Mr. Modi and his special personal attitude to this question. And also it's a big tragedy for Ukrainian society in general, the death of these children and the death of the children which were murdered during the big hunger in Ukraine in 1913 years. So it's very touchable place, very touchable historical side, and as I understand, Ukrainian government is trying to find something common with Indian history also, and to try find a special path to the heart of Indian society in Indian Prime Minister.
There's a closed-door meeting that is now going to commence very shortly between the two leaders of the states. What is expected out of it?
Ukraine is waiting for bigger participation of India as a country in Ukrainian peaceful initiatives. Especially Ukraine is inviting, very warmly inviting India to take part in the second Global Peace Summit, and Ukraine is waiting for the Indian peaceful proposition, and we are willing to develop our economical cooperation, because we have a big perspectives in this in trade, starting from the agricultural production and in the pharmaceutical production, and of course military industry, because we have a very combined military industry complex, post-Soviet, which very common to the India military forces, and very modern nowadays military industrial complex, and we are ready to share our technology also.
Ruslan, also keeping in mind what happened in 2022 when the war started between Ukraine and Russia, there was the plummeting of trade ties between India and Ukraine, the balance of trade heavily favoring towards Ukraine, which was then reduced substantially. Can there be an uptick seen in the trade that happens between Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine and India? Can trade now see normalcy that was there before 2022?
Of course, I think it's quite possible. Nowadays, Ukraine has a special trade regime with the European Union also, and Ukraine could be a gate for Indian companies to the European Union, because we have a zero taxes with trade to European Union. And Ukraine could be, like Poland also, could be these gates for Indian productions to this level. And transition through Russia is not possible now, but I think in the future the peace will be achieved between Ukraine and Russia, and they will discover a huge abilities for India's companies in Ukraine, also in recovering, restoring Ukrainian economic, Ukrainian different sectors of our industry, and so on.
Again, talking about a possibility of India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi becoming a possible mediator between Ukraine and Russia to find a solution to this war that has continued to rage for over 2 years now. Is there a possibility of that happening in the near future?
I believe in it because India is a real non-alignment country, a neutral country in this story. Of course, India has a huge trade with Russia, but at the same time, India has a huge trade with the West at the same moment. But India is not participating in any political or military activities in this war in any of sides. So India is really independent, not aligned country. This country, in this situation, India is very important. It's a big power, especially in global South. And Indian voice could be significant in this situation. And we are waiting for the Indian proposition for a peace regulation.
This is for the first time ever in the history of independent India that the leader of the state has arrived in Ukraine, has visited Kiev. What is the underlying factor behind this visit, keeping in mind in July this year it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi who had visited Russia. He was in Moscow, he met President Putin, and within a month's time there has been another visit, and this time around in East Europe, but in Kiev, to meet President Zelensky.
Of course, we clearly understand that now Indian Prime Minister is trying to balance the international policy of Indian state, especially because that visit to Russia. I want to remind you that in day when the Prime Minister of India was in Russia, the Russian rocket destroyed a childhood hospital in Kiev. It was a huge tragedy in Kiev, and of course it made a bad shadow for this Russian visit of Mr. Modi, and now he is balancing that visit also. He shows now for us that India is not a dependent country of Russia, and India is quite open for any cooperation with any countries. This is underlined. We clear understand this situation. Also, we have a small non-resolved economical problems, because there is a story about the engines for Indian warships, engines which were produced in Ukrainian companies, and there is also a small problems which could be resolved during this visit.
Ruslan, was it fair, keeping in mind that India has had a neutral stance when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia war, and therefore questions being raised, criticism thrown at India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he visited the Russian president a month ago, not just by United States of America, by President Zelensky himself. Is it not right for countries across the globe to respect India's stance when it comes to the conflict that is taking place in East Europe?
I'm sure in it, because India is too big and too important both for Russia and for West at the same time. No one can just ignore Indian position. So I'm sure in it that India could play a significant role in this situation. Also, India could be an example for Ukraine because of its neutrality and non-alignment status. It's one of the main reason of this war, that Ukraine wanted to become a part of West, of NATO, and so on. It's also a part of negotiation between the business side, and India should be an example for Ukraine how to develop a sovereign country, with of course with troubles, with problems, but develop a sovereign country, but not neutral and non-alignment country at the same time.
If I were to, go ahead and make comparisons between the Ukraine-Russia war and hundreds and thousands of innocent lives being lost in the war, and compare it to what is happening in Israel on the Gaza Strip, and there as well there are thousands of innocents that have died. What's Ukraine's official stance when it comes to the Hamas-Israel war that is taking place, irrespective of the terror attack that took place? Who initiated this war on the 7th of October? It is innocent lives that are being sacrificed.
Of course, Israel and Hamas conflict, to be honest, is much more even bloody than Ukrainian war, because of heavy disadvantage of the forces between the sides. And in that war, Ukraine trying to be neutral because Ukraine doesn't want to worsen their relations with Arabic countries, Muslim countries. And there was, at the same time, the Ukraine doesn't want to worsen election with Israel and Jewish lobby in the world at the same time. This war, Israel and Hamas war, also switched off some focus from Ukraine to Israel. It was a political danger for Ukraine at the same time. I think both of this war maybe have much more connections like it looks from the first sight. Because beside of the sides, Israeli and Hamasian war, and beside of the sides, Ukrainian, Russian war, sometimes the same players, sometimes the same interests.
Talking about India and Ukrainian people-to-people connect, there is a significant chunk of the Indian community, especially students and businessmen in the country, that have been thriving and have lived there for decades together, have built a life over there. How important does it become for ties to be stabilized between both the countries, and what more can be done to further this bilateral relationship between the countries?
It's also a very good question, because I have few friends, Indian friends here in Ukraine, who are living in Ukraine for many years. And I was talking with one of them yesterday, and our common position that India and Ukraine should find the way for stabilization of Ukraine, of course, but at the same time, we need to find more economical connections. We need to find how develop our economical cooperation, to make agreements between the corporations, companies, and so on. We need to fulfill our relations, but by the real money, by the real cooperation and real interest at the same time. Of course, Ukraine is willing to give back the Indian students. Thousands of Indian students were studying in Ukraine before the war. They brought a lot of money to Ukrainian economy. They supported a lot of our educational system, and it's extremely important for Ukraine. And the last what I want to say, that our peoples has also historical ties, a lot of historical ties, because one of the main history of development of one of the main theory of development of Ukrainian people, historical development of Ukrainian people, connected to the Indians theory, that Ukrainian people came from India many thousands years ago, and so we are very close in many cultural sites, many traditions, and so on.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.